Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. Welcome to an unusual, unique, and really wonderful conversation on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. We are going to be speaking, or I'm going to be speaking, and you're invited to listen to the conversation, talking with Logan, who reached out to me on Facebook wanting to know how to be more flirty, more erotic with his wife. He's been married for more than 10 years. He's very clearly a scientific guy who likes things clear and straight. And this is the very first conversation that I've ever had with Logan. So a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for allowing us to record so all the other guys and gals listening can learn a little bit about how to be more flirtatious too. Okay, well, let's find out where to begin. Like, at what point is this a topic that you thought, this doesn't come naturally to me, I'd like to be better?
Maybe 10 years ago. Like, it's been a while. And so learning how to get better at that through line of what I think I would describe it as being subtle, a little bit more subtle, nurturing the baseline of intimate connection, which is multifaceted. I don't just mean physical, because there's a huge emotional layer to that, is something I really want to master, because, we have all of these roadblocks of, different personalities and different needs and wants at different times, but also timing. Okay, I work, she works, I'm busy in the morning, she's busy in the morning, she's tired at night. I don't care that I'm tired at night, but I am. The kids. And so nurturing a better baseline just is, I'm realizing how important that is, because then intimacy and larger moments of intimate connection are just able to happen more naturally, because it turns out forcing them doesn't work very well.
Yeah. So how old are your children?
10 and 8.
Okay, so they came relatively early from the time that you were married. So when you were dating your wife, and for that matter, did you date anyone before you dated your wife?
No. Okay,
so when you were dating your wife, did you feel like things were more subtle, more flirtatious, or like, was it something that was present that was lost, or it just hasn't ever really been there?
It hasn't been there the way that I am wanting it. Now it's there to a point now, but I need that 10% help, if that makes sense.
Completely, especially if you mean the 10% that is like 80 to 90 or 90 to 100. That 10% always is a little harder to come by than the 10% that's 20 to 30%, let's just say.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
And no, it wasn't there in the beginning. She was 19 when we got married. I was 22, 23. And it was a really religious context. We're not religious anymore at all. But So it was like we were married a year after we were dating. So there wasn't, yeah, it was immediately conversations about marriage and all of that. So no, it was all to the point very quickly in every way.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. And in terms of no longer being religious, have you been kind of letting go of religious practice at the same pace, or was one of you the leader and the other one followed?
Actually, at the same pace. I think we got lucky in that way.
Super lucky.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm gonna, that's enough information given that we're having this one conversation. I don't know if you and I may have more conversations after, but this conversation is gonna stand on its own. And so that's enough information for me to pivot into actually giving you something to experience and take action on. So let's first get clear on the goal, and I'm going to use my own words for the purposes of clarity, and then you adjust them so it's accurate for you, okay? So in one moment, I thought you might mean how to become masterful so that sexual intimacy is more appealing to both of you, like what to do ahead of time so that you're both a yes. That was one question, but I came to this conversation thinking that your question was more about how to have fun, flirtatious, a little bit erotic, just kind of delightful communication day to day. So those are related goals, but which one would you say you want to focus on in this conversation?
The latter, the through line of being.
Okay, fantastic word. Okay, so I'm going to use the word flirtation. Does that word work for you for what we're
Yes.
talking about? It definitely includes everything I've said and everything you've said. It's all about being playful. So how would you define flirtation? Do you have a definition?
That's a great question. It's definitely not on the tip of my tongue, I can tell you that.
You're not alone.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question because I know what it looks like when it's there. Well, do I? Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I miss the signal. To be fair, I don't feel like I can define it very well.
Okay, well, this is something that is nuanced because I have the impression you're familiar with growth mindset and that, you're an entrepreneur. And so how having clarity and an appropriate mindset paves the way to take the actions that bring the desired results. And that is true in all areas of life. And yet, when it comes to flirtation and playfulness, we're talking about an area which is nuanced and a little mysterious, and we don't do ourselves any favors to pin it down too much, because when we pin it down into definitions and something that is really clear and objective, we lose the fun of it. We lose the spark. So
Right.
I want to be clear that both of those things pertain. However, it's important to start with being clear because that's required to actually access it. Or otherwise you just stumble into it.
Okay. Yeah.
So there are two ways to get clear in this topic. One is to think of a time when you experienced it. It could have been a brief, fleeting moment. It could have been a whole day's worth of interactions with your wife, but a moment when you knew you were on. If we were talking music, you were in tune and the rhythm was good. Mm-hmm. Do you have a moment that you can remember where you had that experience?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe how you felt during it. And I'm asking you to describe it because if you describe it, you anchor it in, and that becomes the reference point. That's the thing you're aiming for. How did your body feel? What kinds of
Yeah,
expressions were on your face?
uninhibited is one word that comes to mind.
Beautiful.
Um, genuine connection, no pretense, no baggage, no expectation, just the moment for the moment's sake, the laugh for the laugh's sake. I think that's how I would describe that.
I love that definition. I'm happy this is recorded because I might take notes. I just think it is such a beautiful definition. And using different words than you, it's about presence. As you say, the laugh for the laugh's sake, the moment for the moment's sake. So this is the first thing to be really clear about. Often people think in a much more transactional way, meaning you do something to get something. There's a means to an end. So you flirt in order to get into bed. That will always make the flirting less delightful. It really is something to do for its own sake. This is a principle that applies in all of sensual, flirtatious, erotic, sexual intimacy. If you're kissing in order to have intercourse, that kiss is not going to be pleasurable. But if you're kissing in order to enjoy the kiss, then it may well, not necessarily, but it may well naturally evolve to other activity. So that principle is super important when it comes to flirtation. And Mama Gina, Regina Thomas Hauer, who wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Pussy, when I was a student of hers back in 2007, I learned her definition, which is completely congruent with yours, but it's just simple and encapsulated, so I'm going to say it, which is flirting is enjoying yourself in the presence of another human being.
Okay, that's cool.
But that's exactly what you said. That's just a more polished version, but I'm not correcting or revising or tweaking anything you said. I'm affirming it while giving her polished version of flirtation is enjoying yourself in the presence of another human being.
Totally. Well, I mean, it's another overlay. It's another layer. I think it's a slightly different perspective that helps inform how I conceptualize it.
Yes, and this is why, happily, you can practice flirting when you're interacting with a puppy, when you're interacting with a baby in a stroller on the street. I mean, I don't recommend doing this since you're an entrepreneur you can do it, but I wouldn't practice with potential clients. Like when you're good, you can have a little more fun in your interactions, but I'm all for professionalism, but there's a way, especially with babies and kittens and toddlers, where they are in the moment for the moment's sake. They are enjoying themselves in the presence of another human being when they are enjoying themselves. Like, you can learn so much from how, a baby in a stroller will look at someone passing by and practically wink, not technically, but it has that kind of energy. And so I invite you to really become a researcher, not in terms of getting serious with your clipboard, but in terms of there are many models that you might not have thought of that you can learn from. Notice what they're doing, get in the vibe. By 10 and 8, I obviously don't know your children. They may not really be in that vibe anymore. They may a little bit. But one of the reasons that relationships are so often stilted is because we don't have good role models. And when it comes to flirting, outside of the movies, our best options really are puppies, kittens, and little humans who are just unbridled in this way. So that makes for having fun in the presence of another human being, but it doesn't introduce the kind of sexy component. But I'm recommending that you start by just having fun. And the way to introduce the sexy component is really to up your attention on your wife. And let me be clear what I do not mean. I do not mean you stare at her. I do not mean you interrogate her with a lot of questions. I do not mean that she needs to respond in any way. When I mean up your attention on your wife, I mean become an observer of your wife in her natural habitat, not having her change anything. So when you up your attention, maybe you start to notice if there are certain topics or certain activities or a change in her energy such that in about 10 minutes she's going to want to go to bed. You probably do notice that, but I'm saying actually pay attention to it. Notice, how does she like her coffee or her tea? Does she have a favorite mug? Does she I happen to have looked at your Facebook, so I know does she currently have long hair?
Uh-huh.
So you may notice when her hair is just long and free, when it's up in a ponytail, like, is it only for more formal occasions? None of the things I'm saying are specifically that important, but I'm trying to describe what I mean by upping your attention on your wife. It's not through asking her questions. I'm a fan of asking questions, but not in this context. Mm-hmm. So what is your response to my encouraging you to just pay more attention in this way?
I totally understand what you're saying, and I see how even doing those things can be kind of a good exercise in presence as well.
Totally. So this is a compounding activity.
Yeah. And it's really helpful. And honestly, I'm not necessarily worried about being super sensual. It's the step before it that you're talking about. Yeah, and which is super helpful. And then it leads to all kinds of good things, sensual and not.
Exactly.
And I think that what you're talking about, I can see how also it'll help me understand her energy in the moment better. Because that's where sometimes I miss, right? Where I'm just misreading timing and stuff like that. And I don't just mean sensual things. I mean virtually any kind of connection. So learning how to read better will be super helpful.
Yes, and I just want to say your wife is a very lucky woman to have you care and be open and interested in this way. That's already amazing. And I want to review what we've talked about and say that there really are 3 steps, but it only makes sense for us to talk about 2 of them right now, and you'll see why. So the first and the second steps, they can happen simultaneously, but you can think of them as distinct and different. So the first step is to just dial up the fun you have in the presence of another person. And by that, I don't mean making jokes. I just mean allowing yourself to have more fun, more playfulness, the way little humans, kittens and puppies can teach us. That's one thing. The other, as we just talked about, is to really increase your attention and observation in knowing who is your wife way beyond what you've known of her so far. Like, if you didn't speak English, what could you learn about her just by being in the same room or noticing when she leaves the room? In other words, it's developing intuition and timing and sensitivity, because this is not a verbal connection, except that you may notice when you use different tones of voice, she responds differently. So, for example, you might say, one of the things you notice when you have more attention on her is that when you say, I'm going to go to bed, she says, okay. And when you say, I'm going to go to bed now, she says, oh, I think I'll join you. Which leads into the third thing, which is once you have observed enough about her in the way we've discussed, and you feel comfortable and a little free enjoying yourself in the presence of another human being, then you weave those two things together for the third phase, which until you have the information, the data from the second phase, I don't have specific suggestions, but I just gave an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because basically, when you can enjoy yourself and you've noted what she responds to, and you are in the habit of noticing that, then you can enjoy yourself and give her what she responds to.
Yep. Okay. That totally makes sense. Thank you. It's given me a lot of clarity very quickly.
Good. I love efficiency. I coach in this area, which is so much about feelings and identity and mushy mystery, but I love clarity and efficiency. So thank you for playing with me in this way. And I would love to have you just say in your own words what you've learned today.
Okay. There's a couple things that I think are really stick out as really significant things. One, conceptualizing, knowing that I needed to define what flirting even is, and then conceptualizing it, envisioning it, imagining it, enjoying myself in the presence of someone else. That's super helpful. And then the hubris is not on also their energy as much, which is significant, I think.
Totally empowering. That's a really insightful, important observation.
So that is supremely helpful. And then, learning how to study and read her. And one of the thought experiments that you gave me that I'm definitely going to think through is, what would I notice if I didn't speak the language? And that's a really interesting way to think. So that I think that'll help me just because, man, you've been married for more than a decade. You get tunnel vision.
Sure.
And there's just a bunch of confirmation bias all behind what you think and feel about the other person, or what you think, or what you think they feel. So now if I can imagine myself as somebody who doesn't even speak the language, I'm just able to step into a different perspective, which I think is going to probably be super helpful and probably really interesting.
Yeah, and I think with those in mind, you'll be able to blend them such that you show up in another way. And I feel like a good way to complete this conversation is to share something I've said many times before, which is that in the context of a long-lasting marriage, everything which isn't sex functions as foreplay. It either brings you a little closer together or a lot, or drives you further apart. So even though we're not talking about physical affection necessarily or any of that, you implementing what we've talked about just enhances the whole relationship when it comes to flirtation, emotional intimacy, sensual intimacy, erotic intimacy. I know you know that, but I really want to affirm it and agree with you too.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your help. You've given me a lot of clarity really quickly. It's pretty impressive. Thank you. It's exactly what I was looking for.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for allowing me to record so many other people can learn as quickly as well. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and please leave a rating and a review. And if you're ready to deepen your relationship and create a truly intimate, delicious, and vibrant marriage, head over to the Work With Me page at alexandrastockwell.com and choose the program that's right for you.